The rain fell in sheets, turning the cracked pavement of East Side's industrial district into a shimmering mirror of neon signs and streetlights. Ellie Harper pulled her threadbare coat tighter, her sneakers squelching as she hurried toward the diner. Her shift at Joe's Greasy Spoon was about to start and she couldn't afford to be late, not again. At 24, Ellie was barely scraping by, living in a one-room apartment with peeling wallpaper and a landlord who didn't care about the leaking roof. Her paycheck covered instant noodles, bus fare, and not much else. But she never complained. Complaining felt like admitting defeat, and Ellie was too stubborn for that. Inside the diner, the air smelled of burnt coffee and fried onions. The fluorescent lights buzzed, casting a harsh glow over the chipped Formica tables. Ellie tied her apron, her hands moving on autopilot. She'd been waitressing here for 3 years, serving truckers and night shift workers who tipped in loose change, if they tipped at all. Tonight, though, the diner was quieter than usual. Just a few regulars hunched over their plates, muttering about the storm outside. Halfway through her shift, Ellie noticed the boy. He couldn't have been older than 6, sitting alone in a booth by the window, his small hands clutching a crumpled dollar bill. His clothes were soaked, his dark hair plastered to his forehead. He looked lost, like a stray puppy who'd wandered, too far from home. Ellie's heart tugged. She glanced at her manager, Joe, who was barking orders at the cook. He'd told her 100 times, no free meals, no charity cases. But something about the boy's wide, frightened eyes made her ignore that rule. "Hey, kid," she said softly, sliding into the booth across from him. "You okay?" The boy didn't answer at first. He just stared at the dollar bill as if it could solve whatever problem had brought him here. Finally, he mumbled, "I'm hungry." Ellie's throat tightened. She'd been hungry before. Really, hungry. The kind that gnaws at your insides until you can't think straight. She glanced at Joe again, then back at the boy. "What's your name?" "Tommy," he whispered. "All right, Tommy. How about a burger and fries?" "On me." She winked, trying to coax a smile. It worked, barely. His lips twitched, and that was enough for her. She slipped into the kitchen, paid for the meal out of her own tips, and brought it to Tommy. He ate like he hadn't seen food in days, his small hands trembling as he shoved fries into his mouth. Between bites, he told her bits and pieces. He'd run away from home, didn't say why, just that he was scared and didn't know where to go. Ellie listened, her heart breaking a little more with every word. She didn't push him for details. Sometimes a kid just needs someone to listen. When her shift ended at midnight, the storm was still raging. Tommy was still there, curled up in the booth, asleep with his head on the table. Ellie knew she couldn't leave him. Joe was already locking up, his scowl deepening as he noticed the boy. "He ain't your problem, Harper," Joe growled. "Call the cops or something." Ellie shook her head. "He's just a kid. I'll figure it out." Joe's face reddened. "You want to keep your job? You don't get involved in this crap. Get him out of here or you're done." Ellie froze. Her job was her lifeline. Without it, she'd be on the street in weeks. But then she looked at Tommy, his small chest rising and falling, his face peaceful for the first time all night. She thought of her own childhood, bouncing between foster homes, never knowing who'd care enough to stick around. She couldn't abandon him. "I quit," she said, her voice steady despite the fear clawing at her chest. Joe blinked, stunned. "You're serious?" "Yeah." She untied her apron, tossed it on the counter, and gently shook Tommy awake. "Come on, kid. Let's get you somewhere safe." The rain was relentless as Ellie led Tommy to the bus stop, her coat draped over his shoulders. She didn't know where they were going. Her apartment wasn't exactly a haven, but she figured she'd call social services in the morning. For now, she just needed to keep him warm and dry. The bus ride was quiet, Tommy leaning against her, his trust in her both humbling and terrifying. At her apartment, she gave him a blanket and the last of her instant noodles. He fell asleep on her couch, a lumpy old thing she'd found on the curb last year. Ellie sat on the floor watching him, her mind racing. Quitting her job was reckless, maybe even stupid, but she couldn't shake the feeling that she'd done the right thing. Still, the reality of her empty bank account loomed large. She pushed the thought aside. Tomorrow, she'd figure it out. She always did. The next morning, Ellie woke to a strange sound, a low, rhythmic thumping that shook the walls of her tiny apartment. She stumbled to the window, rubbing sleep from her eyes, and froze. A sleek black helicopter was landing in the vacant lot across the street, its blades slicing through the morning mist. Her neighbors, most still in pajamas, spilled onto the sidewalk, gawking. Ellie's stomach churned. Helicopters didn't just show up in Eastside. Tommy was awake now, peering out the window beside her. "That's my dad's," he said quietly. Ellie's jaw dropped. "Your dad's?" Before she could process that, a man in a tailored suit stepped out of the helicopter, flanked by two others. He was tall, maybe in his 40s, with sharp features and an air of authority that made Ellie's rundown street feel even smaller. He strode toward her building, his eyes scanning the crowd until they landed on her window. Tommy waved, and the man's face softened with relief. Minutes later, there was a knock at her door. Ellie opened it, her heart pounding. The man introduced himself as Daniel Warwick, Tommy's father. His voice was calm, but his eyes were red-rimmed, like he hadn't slept. He explained that Tommy had run away after a fight, something about feeling ignored amid his father's business empire. Daniel had been searching all night, frantic, until a diner patron mentioned a waitress who'd taken a kid home. "You saved my son," Daniel said, his voice thick with emotion. "I don't know how to thank you." Ellie shifted uncomfortably. "I just did what anyone would." "No," Daniel said firmly. "Not anyone. You gave up your job for a kid you didn't even know." Ellie shrugged, unsure how to respond. She wasn't used to praise. Tommy, now clinging to his father's hand, looked up at her with those same wide eyes from last night. "You're nice," he said simply, and Ellie's chest tightened. Daniel reached into his jacket and pulled out a checkbook. "I want to help you, Ellie. Name your price." Ellie's eyes widened. She'd never seen a checkbook like that, let alone held one. For a moment, she imagined what money could do: pay her rent, buy real groceries, maybe even go back to school. But the thought felt wrong, like selling a piece of her soul. She shook her head. "I didn't do it for money." Daniel studied her, his expression unreadable. Then he nodded, tucking the checkbook away. "Fair enough, but I'm not letting this go. You'll hear from me." After they left, Ellie's apartment felt emptier than ever. She spent the day job hunting, her optimism fading with every "we're not hiring" she heard. By evening, she was exhausted, her future as uncertain as it had ever been. But when she closed her eyes, she saw Tommy's smile, and it was enough to keep her going. Days passed, then weeks. Ellie picked up odd jobs, cleaning houses, walking dogs. But money was tight. She was behind on rent, and her landlord's patience was wearing thin. One morning, as she sipped watery coffee, her phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. She answered, cautious. "Ellie Harper?" The voice was crisp, professional. "This is Laura Chen, Daniel Warwick's assistant. Mr. Warwick would like to offer you a position at his foundation." Ellie nearly dropped her phone. "A position? Doing what?" "Community outreach," Laura said. "Your actions showed the kind of compassion we value. It's a full-time role, with benefits and a salary that reflects your worth." "Mr. Warwick insists." Ellie's head spun. She'd never had a job with benefits before. She stammered a yes, barely believing it. The next week, she started at the Warwick Foundation, a nonprofit that funded shelters, food banks, and youth programs across the country. Her role was simple but meaningful, connecting with people in need, listening to their stories, and finding ways to help. It was work that felt like an extension of who she was. Months later, Ellie stood outside a new shelter funded by the foundation, watching kids play in a courtyard that had once been a vacant lot. Tommy was there too, tossing a ball with other children. He ran over when he saw her, grinning. "Dad says you're helping lots of people now," he said. Ellie laughed, ruffling his hair. "I'm trying, kid." Daniel joined them, his suit replaced by jeans and a sweater. He looked different, less like a millionaire and more like a dad. "You've changed things, Ellie," he said. "Not just for Tommy, but for all of us." Ellie blushed, unused to the spotlight. She thought of her old life at the diner, the endless hustle, the fear of falling through the cracks. It felt distant now, like a dream she'd woken up from. She didn't have much money, even now. Her salary was generous, but went mostly to savings and helping others, but she had something better. Purpose. Connection. A sense that her small, selfless act had rippled outward, touching lives she'd never even know. As the sun set, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, Ellie watched Tommy run back to his friends. She didn't need a helicopter or $1 million to feel rich. She'd found something far more valuable: the power of a single kind act to change the world one heart at a time.